Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Dover-Sherborn and Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committees for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. This open meeting is being conducted remotely, consistent with Baker's Executive Order of March 12th, 2020. Information on how to join remote school committee meetings and meeting agendas are posted on the Dover-Sherborn District website. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, and please be aware that anything that you broadcast may be captured by that recording. So we're going to start with community comments. Please remember that community comments are an opportunity for us to listen to members of the community. It is not a forum for answering questions or engaging in a debate, and we will not, our underlines, we will not be answering any questions tonight. We respectfully request that you please make your comments brief, about 2 minutes, and that you move the discussion forward by adding new information. And we're going to take community comments tonight for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're going to need to move on to other business. Once the public comment section of the meeting has been concluded, we will move to other business, and unsolicited comments from the community will no longer be permitted. So I'm going to ask Maggie to help me because, you know, it's hard for me to see all these screens. So Maggie, do you mind?
Yeah, if you want to, if you plan to make a community comment, we just ask that you use the raise hand feature of the Zoom screen because there are multiple screens and I can't see if you actually raise your hand. But if you use the raise hand, then, and it's under reactions, if you don't know where that is, then you come to the top of the list. So it makes it easier. So I do know that we have a community comment from John Lynn.
Hi, everybody. This is John Lynn, a Dover parent. Just a couple comments. First, I really want to thank all the committee members. I know some of you right now over last year. Thank you for your hard work. I know it's now I have to say it is a thankless job. So I want to give you a million thanks. You know, your volunteer time and no pay and all the hard work, and all the administrators as well and teachers. So thank you very much. And a couple of comments. One is I think this is a new year, right? We need a better look at our hybrid model again, especially on the remote portion of it. You know, Zoom link, Zoom. Google Docs, things like, because the last few weeks I heard from students and teachers about, you know, if students out of state travel or absence for a good reason, they are not able to go back to the Zoom lessons. I don't think that's a huge burden for the teachers because I heard some teacher feedback. So please look at that policy again. It's called, I think it's called temporary access remote learning policy. And other policy, just make sure students really engage and they continue learning because we're learning a lot of things from last year. We should do better. So that's one comment. Second one is on the superintendent search. I know it's in the middle of it. We go to the final 3. So will be a lot of feedback. I can't stress this is so important for all of us. You know, we need a new leader who have the vision and who has the drive and who have the skill set and everything. And also, probably one of the most important things I'm looking at is communication with everybody, right? Listen to everybody, accessible to everybody, including parents, teachers as well. So I just stress this. I hope this is a good decision vote. Good luck to everything, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Do we have any further community comments? Colleen Ryan.
Hi, everyone. How are you? My name's Colleen Ryan. I am a mother of 2 kids at Chickering. And I just wanted to start off by saying how incredibly grateful I am to everyone who is a part of the reopening plan, from the committee members to the teachers to the administration. I, talked to a lot of my colleagues who live across the country, let alone across the state. And we are doing such an incredibly good job. And I'm just so, so grateful for everyone's strategy and their care in getting kids back into school. So with that sort of understanding of how much strategy it took to get us to where we are, I know that you're not able to answer questions tonight, but just to plant a seed, I would love to learn more about what we're thinking about with respect to remote Wednesdays, whether or not that strategy will be changing moving forward, what the plan might be once teachers are vaccinated and administrators are vaccinated, and selfishly, I have a daughter going into 6th grade next year, and I'm really curious about where the middle school might be come the fall. So those are just some things that are on my mind that I was hoping we could learn more about from the committee at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Are there any other community comments?
I think I saw Rochelle Nisrella.
Yep.
Yes.
Rochelle Nisarella put her hand up. Yep. Thank you. Rochelle?
Hi, Maggie and everyone. I echo Colleen's comments and John's. I won't repeat them, but I was surprised not to see on the agenda anything about the status of school reopening. And no, it's a work in progress. We're constantly getting new data, new information. I did happen to attend the Board of Health meeting a couple months ago where I believe Dr. Vitale and Dr. Peterson said and the whole boards said they had no objection to Wednesdays from a medical perspective. I'm sure there are other logistical issues, but I just wanted to raise that as a community concern and also raise the issue of the pace of the additional phases when we can expect the next phase and the final phase. We all know how many variables there are in your logistics. I think it would be great to be informed of where we are in the planning process and to know what's happening and if additional resources are called for, to bring those to bear sooner rather than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rochelle. Are there any other community comments? Okay, community comments going once. Community comments going twice, if I'm missing anybody. Okay. Back to you.
Thank you, Maggie, for your help as always. Okay, thanks, folks. We're going to move on to the Assistant Superintendent Report. So Beth McCoy, I see you over there. I'm going to throw it to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So Andrew and I co-lead this group, and he gave me the opportunity to speak tonight about our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion with DS Aid. And I'm sure that he can fill in any blanks that I missed after I finish. But just thinking about our work as a district, and we are DS, if we rewind a little bit, I won't rewind for 4 years, but and look at the highlights from the last few years. We had our K-12 curriculum leaders engage in a workshop on transforming curriculum and how to move our curriculum from just recognizing heroes and holidays related to various cultural groups to really saying, how do we make our curriculum inclusive of all voices and perspectives, from September through June, no matter the topic. We have had 2 full days of November workshops for teachers, the second one including the performance of Mr. Joy, which all of our parents and community members were invited to. All of our administrators on the leadership team, that's 18 of us, either have or are in the process of taking the IDEAS course, which is basically developing anti-racist schools and supporting all kids. So that's very exciting that all 18 of us can now speak the same language, and we're going to continue to encourage our teachers to do the same. We've had lots of great changes in our classroom and our building libraries over the last few years, as well as work with the ADL, Project 360, bringing in speakers, and of course the Roots and Wings student leadership programs at the elementary schools. So that was prior to this spring, when obviously we witnessed some horrific events and the protests that followed. And out of that came a real passion and energy from the entire community to say, we're not doing enough. And we want to go from being, a district that's, committed to diversity, equity, inclusion to being an anti-racist district. And so that's when Andrew reached out to all of our stakeholder groups and said, who would be interested in working on this as a community? And hence we have what was a task force is now a group of 42 members. You have the list in the packet. We have been working together on a draft mission statement, as you know, so that we can keep our eye on the target and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. You can imagine when you bring 42 passionate people together on Zoom, how long it takes to hash out a mission statement. But generally speaking, the draft right now is to foster a community free from bias and systemic racism to ensure equitable outcomes for all students. So that's where that stands right now. And we will continue to update you as that moves forward. Our name officially is now DS-AID. That stands for Dover-Sherborn for Anti-Racism, Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. It was really important to our group that we included the anti-racism piece in there so that it is an active, a very active piece of what we do to dismantle the systems that promote and sustain racist practices and inequitable practices in our society. We've had multiple discussions as a group. We read an article which I shared with you as well to kind of spur our conversation, especially working in what's currently a predominantly white district. And after all of the work that we did thinking about where DS has come, what needs to be done moving forward, we've divided into 6 subcommittees. Again, you have that list. The leaders of those subcommittees are bolded, so you can see kind of who the steering committee is that meets with Andrew and myself regularly. And they are going to continue to meet in their subgroups over the next few months. Andrew and I will connect with the group leaders from time to time to make sure that we're continuing to move in the same direction, that we're not overlapping and duplicating efforts. If there's any resources that are needed, we can provide them. But there's lots of great work happening in each of those groups. I know that in Culture and Climate, our own Kate Potter is a member of that group, and she's welcome to jump in a few minutes if she'd like to talk about her work. Nancy Cordell is on the Community Outreach group. And then Lynn Collins and Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn, who you know and love, are on the Policy and Procedures Committee. So they're welcome to jump in afterwards and share some of the great work they're doing. The Data and Accountability Group right now is helping to draw up what the audit will entail. As Dr. Keogh's been saying all along, we really need to dig deep and say, where are we in our policies? Where are we with our curriculum? Where are we in terms of our community members and students feeling included and supported? And so having an audit, just as we did for special education, where someone can come in and dig deep and look at data and hold interviews and do some walkabouts is going to be super helpful. So the Data and Accountability group is outlining that work right now. Hiring and supporting educators is pretty straightforward. We already have that group reaching out to local universities and various job fairs to see if we can recruit diverse candidates to join our pool so that when we interview people, we have a large group of people to choose from. And then supporting educators once they come to us, both with affinity groups and, as I mentioned earlier, encouraging our educators, all educators, to take the anti-racist course. Curriculum and competencies, I am co-chairing with Caleb Dolan. And just a few highlights. Once we are able to pick up with the portrait of a graduate again, we are hoping to infuse into that portrait some anti-racist competencies, some social justice competencies to make sure that students are growing those skills as they move from kindergarten through 12th grade and they enter the world with an understanding of those practices and what's important as citizens. Next year, we were due to do a world language audit. As you know, each year we do a curriculum audit in a different area. This year is history. We're hoping to do a curriculum audit for bias, anti-racism across all subject areas, K through 12 next year. So take a break from the content areas and really look at the work that we're doing. And also bringing together a data team to look at our assessments and our achievements and see how we can do better as a district. So I will stop there. I've already mentioned the audit. There have been a lot of great examples that for those of you who are parents, your kids might have come home talking about discussions they've had about the recent protests or how they're celebrating MLK Day or preparing for Black History Month. Again, that's not where we want to be as a district right now, just celebrating a day in a month. But we continue to do that as we expand our efforts. For the high school, the regional committee, I know that John Smith has been providing examples of our work in each of the content areas from month to month. So lots of great things happening across the disciplines. So at this point, I would like to open up the floor either for Andrew to jump in or Kate, Nancy, Lynn, Sarah, if there's anything you want to add about our work in DS-AID.
I just would say thank you, Beth, for that description of what we've been doing. It has been a very worthwhile initiative, and it's one that I think hopefully we will keep working on for years to come. I truly hope that this never goes away, which is why we changed it from being a task force, because it implies that our work will be done in some ways, and we don't believe it is. And I really do hope that some of our reps on the school committee would share a few insights as to kind of what they think about the whole experience and what their hopes and wishes are in terms of this group. It is a really, really awesome group of people. Or not.
Get credit for all the work you're doing.
Can I jump in?
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Kate's raising her hand.
I didn't raise my hand properly though. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Beth, for describing that. And Andrew, so when we first started, and we're such a large group and everybody is incredibly passionate, which is wonderful, I was a little bit concerned about how is a group this big going to really function and get things actually done. So I know, Beth, you described the different subcommittees we're in. Mine is the Climate and Culture Subcommittee. And so even within that subcommittee, there's still a lot of really big things to tackle. So what my group did last time was break our tasks down even further. And we did a little bit of prioritizing. They're all important, but kind of where we could actually start. And we're each looking into some different things, so then when we come back together, we'll be able to share. We felt like that was a way to make it manageable. And there are a lot of good things that our district is already doing. And for climate and culture, we don't want to overlook that. So a lot of what we're doing right now is making sure we learn about everything that's already going on and how can we plug into those existing groups and work all together to make things better or add more in. So that's kind of where the climate and culture group is. And after our last meeting, I felt like things were much more tangible. We had our marching orders.
I'm happy to go next. My thing doesn't let me, I can either clap, thumbs up, a heart, or laugh or celebrate. So I can't raise my hand, but anyway. So I'm doing, yeah, I think Beth, you explained everything brilliantly. I can't really add to it. It's quite an amazing group. And Sarah and I do the policies and procedures group, and I see Scott Kellett there, who's on the team as well. Kate is there. We've got a great group that kind of, I think, covers the span of the categories of policies that we're going to be looking at. Of course, everything that we do is going to be, everything everyone is doing is going to be data informed. So, a lot of our work is going to be sort of inspired by the equity audit and the data that comes out of data and accountability. So in the meantime, we're sort of dividing up and sort of trying to identify sort of the big ticket items. So for example, with SPED, looking at, how those, referrals are made, and to what extent are supports being implemented. So thanks to Kate for laying all that out. We're working with Johanna Adelson on ELL accessibility issues, opportunities that are either missed or can be made, more easily available for students learning English. Obviously, advanced placement and honors class participation. We're going to be looking at that, and again, data-driven. So we're excited about the work. We're overwhelmed by it. We're compiling documentation on whatever policies and procedures and guidelines, and so we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But I think we've got the right people in the group to do it. So. And what I've been thinking about lately is sort of the school committees' role in this whole thing. And I think, you know, there are three things that I feel are important. One, and thanks Sarah for reminding us, we talked about back in June about the school committee participating in training. And I think that it's a good time now for us to do that so that we also are on the same page as the aid group as far as what we're trying to do. So I think that's important, and we ought to get those wheels in motion. I also feel that we ought to make, you know, we should make a statement. You know, we did make a statement back in response to the George Floyd incident. And I feel like, you know, we could, given now that the work, you know, we've got an enormous team sort of and a lot of momentum working on this, I think it would be great if we could make a statement that explicitly supports this group and, you know, whatever its mission is moving forward, but to make clear that we, you know, we support the objectives of anti-racism and, you know, and specifically removing barriers. And then the third thing is money. And I think, you know, we ought to be thinking about when we're talking through our budget, what sort of funding we can make available, because from what I can tell, we're going to need help. This is complicated stuff. And I worry that, you know, a bunch of us sort of just rooting around in our policies and stuff is not going to really accomplish the best objective, as well-intentioned as we are. So that's the other thing. But those are my thoughts. So sorry to ramble on for so long, but that's what I'm thinking.
Really, really good points, Lynn. And I think that whenever a superintendent or a school leader starts something like this, the worry is that it's not going to make it. And it's not going to make it because it's too complicated or because it requires, you know, looking at things we don't want to look at. I'm not as worried about that. I am worried, and this is where there may be a financial impact. I have seen in systems our size even where they have made a commitment to this work and have actually hired someone to kind of lead this charge. Because right now it's Beth and myself, and especially Beth because she's so much better at it than I am, in organizing all of this. And it's a major time suck. And so that is a potential financial implication. I do not think it would be necessarily in this budget, because I think it would need to really be vetted with this group. We would have to think about what this person would do, but I can see something like that down the road being proposed. And then of course the audit itself. We do get a lot of grant money. So and we discussed it a little bit briefly at the Dover School Committee meeting this evening about some of that grant money and whether or not we would be able to apply it to an audit. These audits, to be clear, are not like our special education review that we did a few years ago, where we got an exceptional deal. These audits can run from $50,000 to $100,000. So they are expensive, but you know, you get what you pay for, and it's a deep dive, and there's competition, and that's probably what's driving the market. A lot of people are really interested in getting this done and taking hard looks at themselves. So I do see some potential costs there. If we had any expansion of our programming down the road, obviously there could be costs associated with that. So I just think it's a good question to ask, and I'm glad you raised it, because every time we're talking about budgets, school committee members should be saying, and what are the costs associated with our work related to DS aid? Because we have to be very deliberate about that. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I don't know if anyone else wanted to chime in, Nancy or Sarah. No requirement. Good. Well, awesome. Thank you, guys. It's really been a pleasure doing this. I'm super psyched about it, and we are just scratching the surface, and many of the members are right here. So awesome. Thank you, Beth, for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. It's incredible work. It's exciting work. You know, I think it does take up a lot of time, but it's all worthwhile. So any extra muscles are welcome so that we can do more sooner. I think Maggie has a question.
Okay, and then I have a question for you as well. Go ahead, Meg.
Would you want to go first? Because I lost my question. I jotted down half of it and then got stuck.
Mine is really, well, thank you to all of you. And also how I've had some parents ask me how they can find out what is happening with DS8 and how to, falling off the counter, how to access like this great information. And I do sometimes send them to the packet, but I know even the people watching tonight may not have done that deep a dive. So is that the best way for them to access this at this point, or is there somewhere else?
So later this week or early next week, we're hoping to get off a central office newsletter, and that's going to be where the first round of information about the work that's done so far will be, including links to related documents and action plans. After that, we need to decide, as a steering committee, if we're going to have our own newsletter that goes out regularly, similar to Challenge Success. The difficulty all the time is that when you have school buildings sending out newsletters and each organization sending out newsletters, it becomes information overload. And clearly those of us who are doing this work and all of you feel that it's very important. So how do we get it out in a manner that's succinct but informative on a regular basis? So all ideas welcome.
Maggie, did you come back around?
Hey, I'm a mess tonight. I think it's been answered. I was taking notes and it's good. Just thank you to all of you. This is really important, necessary work. And for the faculty, for all the school committee members and all the parents and community members, like this is really important that we do it. So thank you for doing it on our behalf. We're behind you, whatever you need.
Thank you. Do you want to make it a website for us, Maggie?
I might be able to help with that. Like, I'm not joking. I could help. We could talk.
Teasing.
I see it, Sarah, and then I have a Mark too.
That's actually just what I was going to suggest, that, I think that a newsletter and a targeted communication to families on these topics would be wonderful. But I also think having sort of a repository or a place where DS aid type resources and progress lives for people to access as they choose would be very helpful to us all going forward.
Just to piggyback on that, Sarah, I would recommend to you that perhaps once you get the parameters of that set so as not to unnecessarily consume your time, perhaps you can solicit the community for people who, there have been tons of people, raising their hands to volunteer in some way or another. So perhaps the talent in the community can be leveraged.
Mark, did you want to go?
Sure, thanks. I know, the equity audit can be expensive, but I truly appreciate that DS8 has already formed structured teams ahead of time so that kind of the teams have time to just research and brainstorm and get to know one another before receiving results of the audit. And we're being proactive instead of reactive to that audit as well by doing a little research ahead of time. So thanks.
And along those lines, Mark and Michael, we have learned something and from our initial start times task force to our reopening subcommittee about this kind of overarching group, and then the breaking into subcommittees with specific areas of focus, and then a steering committee made up of the subcommittee leaders. One of the places we learned to communicate with the public was, in fact, at these meetings, because we had the slides and then we shared them. And I can see doing the same thing, kind of work done to date and work still needing to be done. I felt like it may not have been perfect or flashy, but it was a great way of getting that information out to people. And then we could share it. We could just send that directly out to the people with a Screencastify or whatever. So that is my hope moving forward with JSC meetings, is that we will have a more formalized presentation from not a dramatic or 3-hour presentation, but the nuts and bolts of what each subcommittee is working on and what they still need to work on, and maybe kind of their stumbling blocks, just so people are in the loop. But that would be something that I think we could plan to do in at our next JSC meeting, which I believe is April.
Thanks.
Sure. And again, for people watching, if you don't access the packet, I don't know if people do or not, or they just click the Zoom link. There is a lot of information in the packet, particularly this one around DS8 and a list of all the committee members and some things that have been done so far. So I would recommend that you look at that until we get the machine up and going.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments for Beth or Andrew or any of the DS8 members? Good. I'm sure as Andrew said, we will revisit this in each meeting going forward. So there will be opportunity. But thank you very much, everyone, for all your hard work. Just, never seems to end, I know, and it's also important. So thank you. We're going to move to the superintendent's report, and to the point before, there was not a separate bullet point for reopening, but it was included in the superintendent's report. Another reason to read the packet. So I will turn it over to you, Andrew, and then we could take some questions and comments.
Yes. Okay. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is move to the essentially the bullets on my report, the Sustainability Task Force. Just briefly, I'm excited because tonight we are joined by our co-chair, who is a senior at Dover-Sherborn, Catherine Whittle. And I can't see you on my screen, Catherine. I hope you're still here. Are you? Yes.
I'm here.
Excellent. So Catherine has been a fantastic leader as a student, and really an inspiration for me because she's so passionate about green initiatives and taking care of our planet and our environment. And I wasn't convinced until she pulled out her reusable eating utensils. So she has in a pouch that she brings with her to school, a wooden, it's wooden, isn't it? Bamboo or something, Catherine? Bamboo utensils. She's not into wasting plastic or anything like that. And what I appreciate so much about her, and the reason I asked her to be the co-chair of this, is because she puts her money where her mouth is. I mean, talk is cheap, and if you're really good, you can talk the talk of just about anything, but she actually does it. She walks the walk in front of her peers, and she's been instrumental in our grabbing kids to participate in this. So now we probably have somewhere between 15 and 20 kids who participate in our bi-weekly meetings, and we've taken it a step further on the advice of one of our parent members. I thought it was a great suggestion that why not put the students in leadership roles, and they're doing that. And I think it's just been a great thing. So Catherine, I don't know if you'd be willing to just share, by the way, before I let you do that, Catherine was just recently nominated to serve as the Math Youth Climate Council, or serve on the Mass Youth Climate Council, which is pretty cool, and nominated by your peers. Is that right, Catherine? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and some of the stuff that we've been doing with Sustainability Task Force that you think is kind of cool.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine. I co-chair the task force with Dr. Keogh. Just to speak quickly to the Youth Climate Council, I'm in an Audubon Youth Climate Leadership Group. And from that group, I was nominated and elected to serve on the Climate Council. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll serve until the end of the school year. In terms of the task force, I think it's going quite well right now. We started about a week before COVID hit, so we are quite used to being online. I can say that one of the, dare I say, benefits of COVID has been that there are a lot more materials and resources accessible to us. So in the education subcommittee, we've been working on compiling webinars and just information from all these various organizations that normally wouldn't be available to us. So we have that. We also are working on educating people on plant-based diets. So we're going through all these cookbooks and finding all these vegan and vegetarian meals. We have 3 other subcommittees. So Dr. Keogh is in the water subcommittee. And we also have politics and food. So politics right now is working on reusable bags in Dover and Sherborn. Water, we're educating people on the Charles River watershed, and we're looking into how our campuses have their irrigation systems working, how much water we're using, and how we can maximize our resources in that way. And then food, like I said before, we're kind of collaborating between education and food on educating people on plant-based diets. Freshmen do have a health class on nutrition, so we thought we could insert some ideas in there. And I think that's a pretty good summary of what we're up to. We're quite busy, all things considered. So it's a very enjoyable group to be in, and I'm glad we're making some change.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And I am really, really so happy that our paths crossed. It just, it's especially in the midst of the pandemic, that we're doing something that feels a little non-pandemic related and is just good for people and good for our planet and good for our mini society here at Dover-Sherborn. It's been great, and we've had some awesome discussions, and I've had a great chance to meet kids. So I appreciate what you brought to the table, and that's pretty much it. I just wanted to give you an update on that. We will try to also, Catherine does have a website, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna, perhaps I could send that link out to the school committee members, Catherine, just so that people have it and they can take a look. It's a work in progress, but she deserves all the credit in the world. She's done it, and so. Hey, we're ahead of DS8. We have a website, we just haven't published it yet. So good job with that. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me or for Catherine.
Oh, I would just like to thank Catherine for coming and speaking to us. It's not something you typically do, so I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us that nice overview. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, and Catherine, please don't feel obligated to stay. I know you have work to do, and just thankful that you could join us tonight. I'm going to move to the next item, which is the pool testing and just reopening update in general. So first, I'd like to talk about the pool testing, if that's okay with all of you. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the link that I shared with you from the presentation from the state about pool testing. We've had a lot of conversations about testing. The pool testing discussion, I don't know if you'll all remember it, but we were actually talking about it, I think, back in the summer for sure, early summer, as to whether or not it was practical or worthwhile for Dover and Sherborn, or for the schools, I should say. And so the state came around more recently and said, we want to encourage people to participate in this pool testing program. And essentially, just for those at home who did not get the chance to see that link, and it's all on the website in the packet, but essentially it works like this. You take you give a COVID test to a group of 20 to 25 people. You take a sample from 20 to 25 people and it goes into one PCR test. The PCR tests are the reliable tests. Those are the ones that you can count on most consistently. I think Matt Vitale may have said something like 99%, and Matt's with us, so I'm sure he'll weigh in a minute. It's like 99% successful or accurate. So you take a pool of samples, they go through one PCR test. The rationale is that if you took 25 people and gave them each a PCR test, that would be really expensive. But if you took 25 samples and put them in one pool and gave it one PCR test, you cut the cost considerably. And then if it comes up positive, that means someone in your pool someone in that pool likely has COVID-19. Then you contact those people and they take the Abbott Binax or antigen test to see if you can get a more, to thin out and determine who in fact had the positive case. So you can see a lot of advantages and positive things about it. And so I think it's something that I'm inclined to support and participate in. But what I want to be sure that we are clear about, and I hope our doctors can weigh in on this as well, is that it's not a panacea. It's not, we're not testing every person every day. That, if we gave every single person in our schools a PCR test every day and their family members, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. But because we can't do that, we can't be sure, even from the pool. The people in the pool, I guess, would get a pretty quick turnaround on the PCR test, and then they could get the antigen test. So you'd feel pretty confident about that group. But that's only 25 people out of, say, your 600 plus at the high school. You're not testing everyone. You're doing pools. You're doing samplings, a little dabble in this pool. So it definitely makes people feel better because you have some form of testing, but we shouldn't be giving the impression that we're going to be testing everyone, because that's not how it works at all. And so I want to just be clear about that. Matt, and I don't know if which members of our Health and Hygiene Committee are here tonight. I know Matt Vitale is. Matt, I'm sure you could say a lot more than I can on this.
If there's one thing I'm good at, saying a lot more. So what I would say is, I think that the way I would think about it, we sort of had met with Andrew and talked about this, and his big question to us is, this is different advice than you guys gave me before. So what's different now? And I think there are two key differences right now. I think one is the cost of testing, which in the state facilitated process is about 12% of the cost of testing that we're seeing 4 or 5 months ago. So the price point is much lower. I think that the process has evolved. So I think Andrew described it well, but just to kind of reframe it a little bit, basically 10 swabs go in the front of the nose. They go, or 10, 20, 25, depending on the pool size, and they go into a single container, and that container is processed. So if there's a positive result in there anywhere, or if there's 5 positive results, you just know that the sample turned positive. So to then answer the question of however large that pool is, who is the positive case and how do we manage that? You then have to do the second layer of testing. And so the larger pool you have means that, I feel like there's a great analogy with a kid's birthday party in a swimming pool, but I won't use it. But basically figuring out who gave you trouble is your real issue, and figuring that out quickly is really important in terms of mitigating risk. So I think that when we think about pooled testing, it doesn't take away any of the other precautions we have. So we likely won't get universal consent either from faculty, staff, or student families, and we won't have a perfect test. The PCR testing, I think, is pretty robust. The Abbott Binax now doesn't perform as well, but it's really available. So that's what I think makes it appealing on the state side. But I think there's still some valid questions about what's the best approach. That's a current approach that's recommended. And I think that it's really important to say this is really a response to the changing levels of disease. This has not made us able to take more risk. So families shouldn't say, no, it's totally fine. The COVID testing was great. We're going to go see Nan on her 99th birthday. Like, that's not what this is for. That's for saying we're in a community that's seen a lot more COVID right now than before. How can we add safety to that mix? So I think it's a strategy to try to add safety. I don't think it lets us at this point in time change the safety protocols that we have, because I'm confident it won't catch every case. And so we still need to be distant and cautious and keep our kids home if they're symptomatic, even if they had a negative pool test on Monday. I think the other piece to be cautious about, and I would say I'm supportive of it as well, is I think our nurses and our staff have done an incredible job at tracking down cases and communicating with families. So I think we'll have an incremental benefit from pooled testing, but we really wouldn't want to see that undermine the ability to effectively do the core work of follow up with families, responding to faculty, responding to staff, responding for the contact trace, answering questions, And so it's important to make sure that however we pursue this strategy, it doesn't take away from the nurse's job to do that, because I think that's where we get more bang for our buck. And that's a place we might accidentally get ourselves in trouble, is this really concrete thing with lots of steps it's easy to anchor to. Talking to people is kind of a soft measure, but probably where most of the benefit we're getting in the district is coming from. And I think really messaging clearly to families that I think this may be a good and wise place for us to invest resources and time, but this doesn't mean that we can collectively take on more risk, whether that's social behaviors or kind of lightening of our other precautions. So I'm going to hit mute there because I can go for a while. But Kay, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I see you on the line as well.
I don't know if Kay heard you.
I think she heard me, but we don't hear her because she's muted.
Yeah, I was muted.
Oh, okay.
Matt, did you want to talk now about targeting?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was the other question. So there's been a couple of revisions of the guidelines that have come out. So the think tank that Ashish Jha is now at Brown kind of has helped lead, had some revised guidance that they provided around the screening testing, where the recommendation was essentially at lower levels of community spread on the order of 20 cases per 100,000 people per day. They would recommend, if possible, screening of staff. At higher levels, they recommended targeting screening at the high school, kind of as a higher risk group in general. I think that what we've seen in terms of where we're seeing infection, we certainly see a higher rate of infection in the high school student population compared to middle school and elementary school. So our last data run, I think was late last week, was about 1% of, for the period from September 16th onward, about 1% of our elementary school student community experienced a COVID infection, 1% of our middle school, about 3% of our high school. I think our educator was, I think about, I don't see it, 1.1%, and our general Dover-Sherborn community at large was about 2.3%. So what we see is that our rates of infection in the schools in general are lower than the community, but we see patterns that look different between our high school and middle school versus elementary school cohorts. I also think the Vitale boys are magnificent at putting things in their nose, but I think other early elementary learners may have a harder time tolerating that and thinking a little bit about how do we match the kid trauma in school to where do we get the most bang for the buck. I think the other implication there is that older kids can self-collect an anterior sample, where little kids, you then have a significant staffing burden potentially to collect that sample on each individual student, which logistically can be more complicated. Okay, I think I got all of it. Did I get all of it?
You got all of it. Yeah, that's great.
So thank you both. And so that's kind of where we are. The state has this out there. We've expressed interest. And we really just wanted to be sure that the school committee knew that it does look like we're going to pursue this. It does look like we would pursue at least to do this in stages, as Matt has mentioned, and potentially, not potentially, likely starting at the high school and heading down with high school staff and students, likely middle school staff and students, and elementary staff only at this time. That's what we're looking into. And the cost, we don't believe that the cost is going to be insurmountable or something that we can't manage within our existing budget, especially with the federal aid coming through. So we're pretty confident that that's not going to be a deal breaker. I'm glad that we're adding a layer, and I like the way Matt and Jill and Kay have said that from the start, that we're talking about layers of protection. There is unfortunately only one true kind of light at the end of the tunnel that I will feel completely relaxed with, and that is when everyone is vaccinated. Until then, we will always have risk. And that is a concern for me. So I don't know if school committee members wanted to weigh in on any of this before I talk about reopening further. I'm not going to call people, Brooke.
You know what? There's a bunch of people with hands up, Brooke, Michael, Judy, me, and Sarah, and Mark.
Okay, Michael, you're up.
Thank you. I will go quick. I have 3 items, but I'll spill them out quickly and we can move on. First, I did from the presentation, I noted that one of the requirements was that the state, if we're going to be a part of the program, it wasn't clear whether this is the funded part or the complete part being a part of their contract, is that it's a requirement to make the test available to everybody in the building, students, staff, across the board. So perhaps something to follow up on, get more clarification. Another point that I thought was interesting is that one of the school leaders who spoke later talked about the cost being substantially higher than the estimate of $5 per person that was quoted, particularly when follow-up testing needs to be done. But maybe, again, that's something that somebody could reach out and get a further understanding of the true cost based on some of the district's experience.
I think they may have been relating that to for staffing to make it happen, Michael, not necessarily the cost of the testing itself, but I might be wrong. We can look into that.
Yeah, just something that might be good to follow up with. And then third item is just a request to figure out a procedure to have a quick follow-up to positive pool tests so as not to unnecessarily keep students who are not positive but were part of a positive pool out of school for any period of time. So some of that might have to do with the timing of when the pool test is administered, but also making available a very quick rapid test to, not to exclude those students and staff.
So, but that is a legitimate concern that's come up in our conversations about, so who does it and when does it happen? Because if you were to test the pool on Friday and the results come back on Saturday, then who's going to be on duty 24/7 to make sure that those people then turn around and get their antigen tests? So these are logistical things that sometimes get overlooked that are a challenge, because I can't just turn and ask the nurses to take this on or the administration. People are really truly strapped. And so I'm concerned about that. That's a legit concern. And but I think some of that can be addressed by when you give the test. Certainly, you could pool test on Monday and you could pool test on Thursday, and you should have a result back and be able to send people out to get their antigen testing over the weekend. And I believe. Does that sound right to you, Matt?
I think it sounds right. I think the other thing I would add is lots of the cost varies by how big your pool is. So if you have, let's imagine that the PCR confirmation testing is $80 a pop. If you've got 10 kids in that pool, it's $800 to answer the question of which kid has COVID. If you have 20 kids in that pool, it's $1,600. And so there's a sweet spot about how large your pool is based on what the disease prevalence is at the time that can drive what's the most effective pool size to consider. I think that your point, Andrew, in terms of, like, we haven't funded schools to be a 24/7 operation. Like, this isn't the emergency room, and figuring out how do you make it sustainable and what are the tolerances. And I think as we think about family adoption, being as strategic about that as possible will make it a lot more likely that I think we'll be able to get more families to participate, because you'd hate to say, if the disease prevalence is 0.5% or 0.25%, my kid's in a group of 20, like how many times in a month am I going to get flagged out while we're waiting for testing? And so I think that those strategies will be important to be able to message to families about how likely a sample is to be pulled and what the protocol is in a positive test. The state has additional guidance for, if you do the Abbott and all of them are negative, then you still have another cycle of testing. So I think we need to be prepared if we go down this road to say that's part of what that package looks like. And the unintended consequences, I think, are where our risk sits more than cost.
It also matters how big the population is that's willing to participate. There are systems that I know of where the numbers were not where the state would like us to be. And was that 70 or 75% they're looking for? Does anyone remember from watching it? I thought it was something like that, but okay. So.
you have Judy, and also now we are adding to that list also. We have Judy, Sarah, Mark, and Amanda. And then my question actually got answered.
Okay, it's 80%. But so as I understand it, then we're not going to even test all the kids who agree to do this each week. Is that what you're saying, Michael or Andrew?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So then my other question is, when I listened to that presentation, some of the school districts were talking about, oh, and we're going to have to do this for the rest of this school year. And I'm the eternal optimist, and my hope is that the Commonwealth will soon roll out vaccines for our educators and our staff. And then I assume that once that happens, they roll off this program. And then, okay, good. This is why I'm asking the question. And then at some point, if the numbers get better in the spring and they get lower, is there some point at which this pool testing has diminishing returns?
I mean, those are big questions. I think you're right about the vaccine. I think the vaccines, we're going to see vaccines available for teachers, and my prediction is in the next 2 weeks we'll hear about it. We may even be arranging for these things to be happening around February break. But keep in mind, okay, that you get the first vaccine, then you have to wait 28 days, exactly 28, not 27 or 29, 28 exactly. If you miss it, that's a problem. You go to 28 days, then you get your second shot, then you wait 2 weeks before you're at the full 95% success rate. So this is a 6-week operation just for the teachers, and they can still, there's no research showing that once you've been vaccinated that you can't give it to others. And so you can still be a carrier, if I'm understanding that correctly. Is that right, Matt?
Yep. So I think from the Pfizer data, what they were looking at was symptomatic disease, which is when you hear that 95% reduction. I think Moderna also looked for asymptomatic carriage, if I recall the data correctly, which also showed a reduction. But I think a lot of what we heard from the teachers was not only their personal risk, but the risk to people they love. And so I think that as we think about when does that universe of risk change, the vaccine is really effective at preventing severe disease. And so I think that's going to be protective. The first chunk of that protection comes about 2 weeks after the first dose, but as Andrew said, you don't get full protection until after the second dose, but there's likely some benefit about 14 days after the first dose. But I think if you have like a teacher who says, I live with my elderly parent, or I'm a caretaker for an infirm relative, those risks are still there until that relative's vaccinated, until the teacher's vaccinated. And for our students, we likely won't have the EUA for our kids under 16 until some point in the fall. So it's quite likely we will be navigating the 2021 school year, figuring out a lot of these same questions still. I think we'll be in a much better place than we started this school year, but I think that's part of what is hard to get our head around, but is probably the reality, facing at least some risk of transmission still in our school community.
So that in a nutshell is why I say, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? When everyone is vaccinated, because until then, there's still all sorts of risk. There's risk of our students having it. There's risks of our students carrying it. There's risks of our teachers carrying it, even if they've been vaccinated. So we're far from out of the woods, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let's keep, Maggie, you have the list. Judy, did you get your answer?
Yes, thank you very much. Depressing, but yes.
Sarah.
Thanks. You know, unfortunately, I think we are far from out of the woods because testing of the vaccine has not yet even begun for younger children. And so if, you know, I'm very excited about the prospects of a vaccine for our teachers and our administrators, and for obviously all of the health personnel that hopefully have already received it. But but for our kids, we have a long road ahead of us still, where we can't really depend on that as a viable option. So I'm really pleased to hear that we are thinking of surveillance or pooled testing as an additional layer of protection, and taking advantage of the state's program that's being put into place. But I just wanted to say that, I mean, I did watch the webinar, and it strikes me that there is a very heavy administrative and logistical burden to rolling this out and rolling it out well. You know, administering the testing, keeping the pools straight, communicating the positive results, thinking through, you know, the protocols for what to do when there is a positive result, and, you know, how you can kind of refine those sets as quickly as possible. So I just want to make sure that we're, you know, geared up for all of that, that we have the, you know, the resources and the staff that we need. I do think that, you know, I'm sure the nurses are already being stretched beyond their limits. So I just want us to think creatively about, in order to do this and to do this well, you know, what do we realistically have to have in place? And lastly, I was under the impression from the webinar that the idea would be that you would be doing wholesale testing of the entire population that had opted in on a weekly basis in order to be, you know, getting a true surveillance testing effect, and that you could tinker with the pool size from 5 to 25, depending on, you know, what the disease prevalence was, you know, how many times you're getting positive hits. But I would think that the idea would be that you would want to get your cohort tested, at least to the degree that they had opted into the program, on a relatively frequent basis in order to have the surveillance be meaningful.
Can I comment? So I think that I think within the universe of the case over a sample period, you're sampling everybody in the cohort, but you might say, I've got high school cohort A on Monday. I've got middle school cohort A on Tuesday. I've got high school cohort B on Thursday. So you're likely testing kids 4 or 5 days a week. So in any given chunk of time, you have a subset of the school community that you've tested and screened. And then you have this universe of cases. So if I've got an elementary school learner and I've got a middle school learner, they may be sampled on different days. And so different chunks of it are sampled in that sample period that would then include the universe of the testing population. So I think the whole universe is tested every week, but a given chunk of it is on different days.
Did that answer your question, Sarah?
It does. It's daunting, but it's also exciting, I think, and hopefully hopefully another layer of protection for us to keep each other safe.
Mark.
Thanks. I generally believe that access to data is helpful, but I wonder, you know, I know Wellesley's not doing exactly the same type and structure of surveillance testing, but I'm curious about what value has been added from towns that at least have adopted similar types of surveillance testing, because I am concerned about how it can impact staffing and student enrollment if we have, you know, one positive in a sample of anywhere between 10 and 20 individuals where you pull them all out, particularly for staff if you need subcoverage as a result, and so on.
That has been a major concern. Mm-hmm. Even if you lost them for a day, that's a day that you, in an elementary school where your staff is pretty limited, you could close school for a day. So that's one of the things to be considered. I mean, these are all relevant points. There's no question about it. I don't know if I cut you off, Mark, or if Matt or Kay wanted to weigh in on that.
My one comment is I would probably align teachers with their, like, again, my advice would be, to the degree possible, align teachers with their student cohort. So if you have a chunk of people gone, you can say, this classroom is out because half of the class is in an affected cohort. So I would minimize the degree to which you're like, we have every third grade teacher in the same pool. Whoops, that went badly. And so being somewhat strategic, even in mixing staff across schools, or you could say, I'm going to modify the staff pool size because the disruption there is 5 people is 5 classrooms, and we may say we want a smaller pool size. So I think there's likely some ability to mix and match, although I haven't seen that granularity from the state. But I think the question of like, what's the bang for the buck? I don't think we know the answer. So I think that what we can infer is from places that have done this in a really aggressive way, so higher education, where we've seen lots of testing, we've seen pretty high-risk residential campuses, and I suspect high-risk social behaviors. And we haven't seen rampant super spreader events in general in those places that have had thoughtful application of precautionary measures. So if you're like, everybody went to a rave and didn't wear masks, you can screen them all, it's still gonna be a hot mess. But if you have a modicum of sensibility and robust testing, it has done better than I think any of us would have predicted college campuses would look in those places that embraced it. I don't know that we can say, here's our ROI on it, because I just don't think the data is good enough. It may be that we'll be able to answer that question in like 3 months, because we may have comparable school districts where you can say these 2 neighboring towns did it, one didn't. This was the number of student day missed because of COVID. I think what we're trying to protect against is, if we get disruption because we found a case we would have missed, it is disruption, but that's the goal. It's finding those cases to say we made our schools a little bit safer today, and we tolerate as a community that level of disruption. But I think it's important to recognize those two go hand in hand. And Kay, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, also, and this speaks a little bit to Judy's question from earlier, that if the prevalence in the community were to drop substantially to levels, say, that we saw last summer, we might find that testing didn't make sense, that there wouldn't be much return on investment, because if we have very few cases to begin with and we cut that number by 20%, we haven't found many cases. But if we start seeing a higher prevalence of disease in the area, then the test may become even more important to us than it would be right now. I would also say that this is really emphasizing what's already been said, but finding a way to have rapid turnaround of follow-up testing when there's a positive pool is going to be key to the success of this, I think.
Good both.
And if I could just add one other comment, going back to Judy's question about light at the end of the tunnel. So what I would say is, like, my team has been, like, I'm here today because I'm on the COVID unit clinically, and my team has taken care of COVID for the last 10 months. And I think 70% of my team cried with a sense of relief when they got their first shot. I can't wait until we have DS teachers crying for that same sense of relief. And so we're still going to have a super weird 2021. It is going to be better. And so I think that the piece to emphasize is that we still need to really have a great 2021 plan. We need to be thinking about this over the next 6 months and recognizing it's still going to be weird. But it feels so much different when you have that piece and you're like, I've got a tiny chunk of normal that I can picture again, like getting on a plane without thinking like, am I going to die? Going to work without feeling worried about it. And I think that relief matters, even if it doesn't mean we can take on new risk. And so I remain wildly optimistic, but still cautious. And I think that that's a piece to balance, but also I don't want to take away from that hope, because I think it's been an enormous amount to us.
Amanda had a question.
Actually, Mark raised my question. It was about staffing. So I'm all set. Thanks.
And then my question got mostly answered except for one thing. And that is that even though I share like Mark's concerns about staffing, and I think Matt's ideas about how to schedule the tests so that you don't create like a total domino effect of like a whole team of people going down or whatever is really wise. And I do hope that we do this. I hope that we take advantage of this, even though it definitely seems like it's a weight on our resources and maybe we're going to need to hire some help. And I hope that we're able to afford to do it. You know, and for me, it's like super personal. Like, I am an educator. I'm not vaccinated. I've looked at the comorbidity list, and I am almost asthmatic enough and almost high blood pressure enough, and I'm one BMI point away from being obese enough to be like extra in line, but I'm not any of those things. But if I get COVID, like I could get like wicked sick. And my understanding, and I guess that's my question, is like a lot of COVID is asymptomatic. And so, you know, teenagers are especially, like I have one, we're trying to keep them at home, but it's like wicked hard because they escape sometimes. And this is wicked stressful. And I don't want to like speak for our faculty or anything, but it's really, really hard. And if there's anything that as a community that we can do to support these folks, because when you're stressed and anxious all the time, it's really hard to do your best job as a teacher. And I just, if there's something that we can do and it is possible to do and it would make people feel safer, I have to support it. That's just my 2 cents.
And I could not ask for a better segue, Maggie, because that, you know, as I lead to the next piece of this particular piece, which is with regard to reopening, the question's been coming up a lot. Well, why aren't we reopening? Because I mentioned around the holidays that the next time we would even consider it would be around the turn of the semester. Well, that's February 1st. So people are expecting that this is a done deal and that we're gonna just reopen. And I can understand that position. I can totally understand that position, especially as someone who does not worry about it. Maybe I should, and I'll probably regret the day that I said that. But it's not. I guess I just figure I will fight through it or whatever it is. Maybe I'm just a damn fool. But there are people out there who feel very strongly that it's not that concerning. They look at the numbers of kids who get sick from it and they say it's not that bad. So we're good with it. So let's bring everyone back. But on the flip side of that is the other cohort of people who say, well, I am worried about it. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried about my mother. I'm worried about my father. I'm worried about, etc. Fill in the blanks. And my family members who do have the comorbidities, there's a lot of anxiety. So in response to the question that I know is on the lips of so many people who are listening, it isn't as simple as just having the logistical issues worked out. It's not as simple as just having the cafeteria space addressed. No, we can't fit more than 60 kids in that lunchroom. That is a big problem. But that's not the only problem. The other half of the problem is that we have members of our community who are really scared, truly, legitimately scared right now. Now, here's the thing. This all links back to our earlier conversation, you know, where we talk about #WeAreDS. There was a time, because I lived here, when those kind of who were the strongest were the ones who excelled. If you weren't strong, if you didn't have a voice, if you couldn't be loud or vocal, you could get bowled over. Well, that's not WeAreDS. That's we are whoever's most powerful. I am trying to think about this holistically, think about the whole system. And I want to be sure that we keep our teachers. I don't want teachers asking them to go remote. That changes everything. We do have to factor into this puzzle that at the secondary level, so at the middle school and high school, kids change period by period. So they change classes by period. They get up and they move. Now, okay, in some cases, you might be able to make it so the teacher goes to them. But the fact of the matter is we're talking about bigger bodies moving around the building. And our numbers have been very good. But is it because we're just amazingly healthy people, or has our hybrid model been a factor in our numbers staying where they are? So meanwhile, there are a lot of, I hear a lot of people talk about the anxiety of kids. We're seeing that statistically that our numbers are not showing tremendous amounts of anxiety on the part of the kids. What does make them anxious, I believe, what makes a lot of our kids anxious is the idea of them getting it. So this is why I'm worried about swabbing elementary kids, because I think it could potentially really freak out elementary kids. And it's why I'm worried that some of our kids who are actually excelling in this model might not excel if we move forward. So when we think about all of these decisions about reopening, I am trying to think about it with all of those stakeholders, even the less represented stakeholders who might not be vocal, in mind. And to that end, I really do mean what I said earlier, that the place that I'll be really comfortable is when I know everyone's vaccinated. Until then, I am going to be slow to move forward. And that's just where I am on this. I do believe that our model is working. Is it great? No. Has anything this year been great? I don't think so. But we're certainly where our neighboring school systems are. And I don't think we have anything to be ashamed of in terms of our progress in terms of reopening. I would like to see us make progress on that. And I'd like to continue to work with Matt and Kay to see if our numbers go down. But like for today, for example, 5 cases reported today, 5 cases. Those people could be contagious or could have been contagious. It's not like they're inside a bubble. So that's concerning, at least from my standpoint. You know, I see the kids, I know that our teachers are doing everything they can to keep kids at a distance from one another, but they're kids. And if you watch them run around, they get outside for their mask break, they're attracted to each other like magnets. And we have challenges there. So in terms of the reopening, for right now, I do not want to give a false message that we are going to move forward with the reopening in 2 weeks, which would be February 1st for the secondary level. That's not going to happen. I do think that if we're lucky, we'll see that some of our numbers drop down in the community, and we'll start to see some of our numbers drop in the schools. And then I will feel more comfortable with it, because I expect that to probably dovetail with first doses of vaccine. But that still is a guarantee of nothing. First dose doesn't get you there. So it's kind of, the question is, how much risk are we willing to take as a community? And by that, I mean a school community. And I'm open to suggestions.
Not a suggestion, Andrew, but I just would like to point out what is, well, maybe it's obvious to everybody on the call, but you know, we're at a unprecedented high level of infection in our communities, right? Matt issued his kind of summary of the 2-week look back, and we're a heck of a lot closer to being in the red than we are to being in the green. And my concern is actually being able to maintain stasis and be able to continue hybrid rather than going fully remote.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's,
Yeah,
Andrew, oh, sorry, go ahead, Judy.
I have to say, I fully support every word that you said tonight, Andrew. I think it's wise and good to move cautiously, particularly given that the numbers are really high. You know, when they start to come down, let's revisit, and when it gets warmer out and we can go outside more. But I completely support everything you said.
I'm going to jump back into facilitation duties. I apologize if I've been remiss. Nancy, you're up. Go ahead.
Andrew, I'm just wondering for the parents out there that, and we received an email tonight about when, you know, when the opening, you know, when you're looking to open again. You know, I know it's the numbers are high, but is there, you know, what are the thresholds? What can parents look for, you know, when we're back closer to the green, when the vaccines, you know, people had their first doses? I mean, I feel like it's a little, I know it's not an exact science, but it seems slightly, and, you know, for lack of a better term, wishy-washy of when we might open back up again. So, and I didn't know if there was something parents could kind of say, you know what, okay, great. We see this moving down, and, you know, it looks like we'll probably get to go back in school within 4 weeks from now.
Well, I think the first mistake I made, Nancy, was ever saying that I had a date in mind, because that's madness. Trying to figure out a date in this time is really, really hard, because it's like, it's a moving target. I would say layers of comfortability, I suppose. I feel more comfortable if we have everybody vaccinated with one vaccine. I feel more comfortable if everybody's had their second dose and 2 weeks have gone by. Then I feel a lot more comfortable for our staff, but it doesn't address our issues with or concerns with our students or our families. And one of the other concerns that's come up is people say, well, if you do bring them back, we're going full remote. That creates another problem for us. That creates a problem for our administrators. What do we do with these kids who are full remote? It's not as easy as it looks, especially when you start getting into the elementary levels, although we've managed that so far. But at the middle school level, it could be challenging. So that's one of those things. I would say to the people who are asking, number one, and I appreciated Mr. Jaffe's response to somebody who wrote, we have had a plan. The plan has been for us to monitor these numbers, to pay attention to these figures and see where we're at. Right now, the figures don't look safe. I don't think that would be wise. If the plan said, well, we're coming back on February 1st, come hell or high water, you'd be saying to me, are you crazy? Our numbers are too high right now. So it can't be etched in stone the way people would like. And that's the frustration of the pandemic. That is the frustration of every superintendent. By the way, my phone's buzzing away right now with superintendents having conversations about vaccines. We're all under this tremendous pressure because people want answers and they want stability and consistency, but none of us can provide it. We come close, but we can't really provide it fully. And so I would say that for me, I would like to know that all of our teachers are vaccinated, and I would like to know that we can address all of our logistical issues. But addressing the logistical issues means increasing risk in other ways. For example, if we have a full school and we can only fit 60 kids in the cafeteria at a time, okay, so then we'll move some of them into the gym. Okay, no problem, but that means something for those gym classes, right? Because it means a whole group of students were in there eating with their masks off before the next class went in there. But say our ventilation's amazing and it blows it nice and clean and fresh, and that's fine. Well, now because we'd have double the number of students in, and this is the same issue at the high school as the middle school, those kids now have to spread into classrooms and eat in classrooms. And I can assure you, it may not sound realistic, but it's true. A teacher will say to me, I don't want my classroom used by 25 kids or 20 kids who were in there without their masks on. And then I go marching in there. That makes me uncomfortable. That's a real life issue. And that's why I say it's not strictly, it's not strictly the logistics. It's not, it's not as simple as, well, geez, I mean, if it's only the cafeteria, then let them eat in the auditorium. If it was that easy, every superintendent in America would be doing it. It's much more complicated than that, especially when you're trying to keep the teachers happy and coming back and effective. Sorry for the rant, but that's the only way I can explain it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments with regard to
Megan and Amanda, hands up?
All right, Megan first, then Amanda.
Thanks. And Andrew, I know you've seen and received a lot of these communications from parents, and we all are as they're buzzing around the community here. And I just wonder if it might be helpful to put out some kind of communication to parents after this meeting, just letting them know what our short-term plan is and what our next steps are going to be at this time, and that we will continue to reevaluate and try to move towards bringing kids back when we feel it's safe to do so. But, here's what we're doing in the short term, and this is what we can speak to right now because of the uncertainty of this situation. And maybe that would help to, just kind of put some of the conversations to rest for a little while.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Megan. And I guess I'd say great minds think alike, because that's exactly what I'd hope to do tomorrow. Is to reach out to people and let them know what was discussed tonight. But I wanted to discuss it with the school committee first, as a courtesy.
Amanda?
So like Judy, Andrew, I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your explaining some of the complexities behind all of this to the community, because there are so many variables. And I also share Michael's concern about where we are as a community. And so I'm going to ask kind of the inverse of Nancy's question, and that is, when do we pause and go partially remote again? We did have those cases today. I'm guessing a lot of our testing is happening around symptomatic cases, which means there could be asymptomatic cases that could drive us to go to remote that we don't know about, which has happened in Wellesley. We just were remote last week at the high school as a result of testing. We're back hybrid this week. But I'm just curious, in the reopening guidelines, it talks about the combined case rate being in the yellow for 3 consecutive weeks. And that is one criteria for evaluating the need to reduce in-person learning. So I guess that's my question, is what is that threshold? Because it has happened. I know in England, they are now shut down again. I don't know if we need to wait for direction from the state or if it's just going to happen on a local level. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are about that.
It's a good question, and that is also on my list of things to do, which is to have a meeting with our health and hygiene folks to see if, in fact, our numbers are at a point where we need to have any reconsidering of our current model. I'm pretty certain that Matt and Kay and Matt and the 2 boards of health would have been pounding on our door if they felt it was alarming enough. But I do think, I know that they're watching it closely, just as we are. I don't know, did Matt or Kay, is there anything you would add to that? I mean, do you?
Shall I
Go ahead, Kay.
So I would say that that the numbers per se are, though they're important, aren't as important as whether we're seeing any evidence that there's transmission of COVID in schools. And what is really remarkable, and maybe it's not so remarkable because it shows what social distancing can do, is that we haven't had any case that we know has been a result of in-school transmission since September. I believe there's one case where it's unknown.
We should collectively knock on wood with that one.
Yes.
I totally agree.
So one reason to consider closing a school is if there is in-school transmission or closing a classroom or whatever. Another reason would be if there were so many individual cases of COVID and enough close contacts in the classrooms that it just logistically wasn't possible to conduct school because too many people were in isolation or quarantine. And so I don't think I can speak to the fact that I know there's not been in-school transmission. I can't speak to the logistical issues, but I haven't heard that the logistical issues are significant enough yet to consider closing shutting down a classroom or a school. I don't know if you recall, but I'm sure you recall hearing about the basketball and hockey cases at the beginning of the holiday break, and those required quarantine of every member of those teams. If that had happened during while school is in session, it's possible that would have, for logistical reasons, shut down some classrooms or grades or perhaps a school. But that was very fortunate that happened over the break, and there hasn't been anything analogous, again, knock on wood quickly, since then in the sports arena.
I think one other thing I just also want to say explicitly is, like, nobody has more than a year of experience with COVID. So I think there's also things that we've learned with 6 months of schools being open in different parts of the country that we didn't know over the summer. And I think that you see that in the evolution of the output of think tanks. And in general, I think that over the summer, there was a big feeling that when you get to a community rate, you'll saturate the ability of schools to do it. and to be able to do the contact tracing and the follow-up and the isolation, the quarantine. And I think that, like, I think last time Andrew talked about setting up the statues to the nurses, and I think we owe an incredible debt of gratitude to our nurses, to our teachers, to our staff and other faculty, to our bus drivers and everybody else who has relentlessly gotten our kids to behave better than we generally do, because the rates at school are lower. I mean, what we see is that kids in a structured setting tend to do better. I think that what we have to be conscious of as families and as parents of those kids is to say, we owe it to our teachers to stay on that and to kind of keep fighting the good fight, especially for our later adolescents, to say, I totally get that you really want to do this and you can't do it right now. But I think that in-school transmission piece has really replaced a cutoff piece, not just at the sort of local Dover-Sherborn level, but that's kind of what's been coming out of the national experience and internationally. I think we do know that there's a secondary attack rate. The last paper I saw was out of Italy with a 3-foot limit was about 4%. So I think we should have a lot to be grateful for in terms of, I think we've had about 130 close contacts with no secondary cases. So we are doing better than that. Again, I'm knocking on Formica. But I think we have to recognize, like, we can't make that number zero. It's not going to stay zero. And so our job as a district is to be ready to respond, to say, hey, this is the classroom where it wasn't zero. This is the time that we need to act. And we need to learn from and kind of do that deep dive to say what didn't work as well as we hope for here. How can we mitigate the risk to say, you know, we had a transmission. How do we make it less likely in all our other classrooms for all other days that we'll have another transmission?
And we have it's a bit of a blur, so I may be wrong about this, but I believe we have closed a class at Pine Hill early on in this process because we were concerned. So we will do that, and we've had some close calls along the way. So we will do that, but we haven't felt like we had to yet. I can't agree more about the in-school transmission, but again, to counter to counter the argument that, well, then in that case we should be bringing them back in. Part of the reason that we believe we're not having in-school transmission is because we've used the model that we've used. Also, part of the reason we've been successful in educating our kids and not rocking the boat too far is that we've struck the balance with our teachers. If we swing to this other extreme, we knock this thing out of balance, and I'm worried about that. And I don't have an exact, easy answer to that. I just don't. I just think that we need to watch the numbers. I think, as I said before, I'm pretty confident that the vaccines are going to start coming out soon. I'm really confident of that based on conversations that we've had with people. I think, by the way, we deserve a lot of credit. And this is a credit to Kay Peterson, who got this thing rolling in the first place, I believe, was getting that testing available through AFC has been hugely important. If we have a symptomatic school member, staff or student, we can send them right over there and get a test and get a result within like an hour. That's huge. Do you know how many systems do not have that? That is so awesome. In fact, it is so cool that Natick called me, the superintendent, Anna Nolan, called me and said, how did you arrange that? And I put her in touch with Dave, and they're now doing it. Incidentally, our nurses are now vaccinated, first round, getting their second ones in the next few days, thanks to AFC. So we're way ahead of a lot of places on this. Just, I need to point that out. It's hugely important. Okay, thank you for getting that set up.
Yeah, thank you. And Kate, that was exactly the case in Wellesley last week, was they didn't feel like they had the staff to open the high school safely because there were so many close contacts that were needing to be tested and stay home. So that was part of the complication there.
And that's one of the complications that I expect, quite frankly, when we do pool testing. I'm expecting it. I just know it's going to happen. So is it what's best? I know that I'm playing devil's advocate, but is it really, in fact, what's best, or is what we're doing working? It's a rhetorical question because I don't think there's an easy answer.
I'd rather know, I think, but thank you, Andrew. It all, it feels right to me what you're saying and what you're doing. So
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so the last thing that I'll be asking you guys to hopefully vote on is an extension of the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, the FFCRA, that's in the packet in my my superintendent report. Essentially, this allows for people to get paid sick leave made available without using their actual sick time. And it's because the bill was extended and signed on the 27th. I'd really defer to Dawn on specifics around this because I think she knows it better than I do.
Right, so we're just asking the region to approve this because obviously you're the governing body of the employees at the region. We're in conversation with the town of Dover and Sherborn to see where they stand with our other school employees. And I believe it's on Dover's Board of Selectmen's meeting tomorrow, on the 21st, to approve it. And I'm in close contact with Sherborn to hopefully do the same. So basically the legislation on December 27th allowed the platform to continue this. So it gets really complicated. There's a private side and a public side. On the private side, they're extending the tax credits that employers can get if they offer this to employees. On the public side, it's just allowing us to have the platform. We don't get tax credits, but technically if it costs you money, you can use some of your CARES money. Remember, the private side didn't get CARES money, the public side did. So it gets a little complicated. But what I'm asking, or what we're asking the regional school committee to do tonight is just, it has to be approved by your local government to enact the extension. So we're just asking you to allow us to continue offering the benefits that were already there, extend them to March 31st. And just so you know, you can only take, you're only afforded this once. So basically there's 80 hours in there for coverage for COVID-related absences. So it's not a multiple time you can take advantage of it. It's once, and it's not extending. You're not getting additional time. It's just allowing you to use unused time through March 31st, if that makes sense.
Sure. Brooke, do you, yeah, Michael, do you have a question?
Yeah, Dawn, why is the request until March 31st only? I believe that the state has pushed out longer.
Yeah, no, that's the extent of the legislation at this point, is March 31st.
Thank you.
I could be coming back to you in March and asking for another extension. For right now, though, the platform is there to extend through March 31st.
Brooke, do you want me to just take a quick vote for the region?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I invite a motion from someone from the region to continue our support of the FFCRA for regional school folks until March 31st, as requested by the district?
So moved.
Judy.
Michael Jaffe, second.
Seconded by Michael Jaffe. Is there any discussion? Just want to say thank you. This is the right thing to do. Can I have you take yourselves off mute for a roll call vote? Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Ann Hovey.
Ann Hovey, yes.
Kate Potter.
Potter, yes.
Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it for my report, Brooke.
Thank you so much. Moving on to policy, we have a second read of the updated restraint prevention and behavior support policy and procedures. Can I turn that over to Lynn or Sarah or one of the policy folks? Andy's not here.
Sure, I'm happy to take it.
Brooke, I just have a quick question. It doesn't say action required on that one, but are we voting on that tonight if it's a second read?
I was wondering that myself, actually.
I think we are voting on that tonight.
That was a mistake. That should have.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, it usually is. So
Sorry
Sarah,
about that.
You want to tee us up?
Sure. Well, you know, as you all will recall from our last meeting as a joint committee, we have proposed a revision to the policy regarding physical restraint of students in the Dover-Sherborn Public Schools, essentially just to keep up to date with the DESE regulations and the MASC model. So the materials that you have in your packet tonight are actually unchanged from our December meeting, other than the fact that the dates have been updated to reflect the first reading and now the second reading of this policy. I'm happy to take any questions or concerns. We haven't heard anything in the interim from folks in between meetings, but I'm happy to entertain them now.
Amanda?
This is a language thing, and I remember it came up, I think it was last year, around our policies and using non-binary language to refer to students. And there's a himself and a herself in the beginning of this. And I just want to make sure that all our policies are consistent in terms of language we're using around gender.
Can it just be changed to the gender neutral themselves?
I mean, I think that we could do, yeah, I mean, I have a problem with the grammar there, I have to confess, but we could say prevent a student from self-injury or injuring another student or school committee member or school community member, excuse me, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, and we can approve it with the language change, I'm assuming. Thanks, Amanda. That's a good catch. Any other questions for Sarah before we vote by committee? Thank you so much, all of you. I know Angie's not here, but Lynn and Sarah and just doing this yeoman's work with with policy changes. Kate, did you have something?
I do, thanks. Just, yeah, just quickly, I'm wondering if, so you meant, it's mentioned on our last page of this packet that strategies to support, basically to kind of try to avoid the need to use physical restraint. And I'm kind of assuming that staff are receiving professional development in this area, and that I know certain staff members receive maybe more specific training in restraint, but are all staff members trained in some form of it? I'm just kind of wondering, having been in some of these situations in my past teaching career, if you're the one in the room with a student and you're not on the care team, what is the plan?
Can I hand it off to Kate McCarthy?
Yeah.
I just unmuted. So yes, so one of the other steps in aligning the policy is also aligning the beginning of the year teacher training with the new policy and having staff understand the steps and those parts exactly. So yes, there's a training that happens in the beginning of the year that incorporates this. And I would say that there are people in the building that get that extensive 16-hour safety care training, but it's a continuous conversation all year long. I think a lot of the things that you'll see is as the interventions and the discussions are talking about students and how they're doing. And through that, it's really a lot of professional development and thinking through specific concerns, but throughout the year, they talk about it, but it's always kicked off in the beginning of the year with that teacher training that talks about all the different ways in which we prevent restraint and the process in which we follow if it does arise. Did that answer your question, Kate?
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Kate, for shedding some light on that. If there's no more questions, then why don't we do Dover first? Dover, do I have a motion to approve the second read of the updated restraint prevention and behavior support policy and procedures?
Mark Healy, so moved.
A second?
Colleen Burt, second.
Any discussion? All right, do a quick roll call. Sarah?
Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
Leslie?
Leslie Leon, yes.
And Brooke Matteries, yes. And I'll throw it over to Maggie. Do you want to go next and then throw it to Megan?
Could folks at the region take off their mute? Do I have a motion to approve the restraint policy as just articulated by Brooke?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Great. Do I have a second?
Michael Jaffe, second.
Thank you. So make the motion by Lynn Collins, second by Michael Jaffe. Any discussion? Okay. Judy Miller,
Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn Collins,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Ann Hovey,
Ann Hovey, yes.
Michael Jaffe,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter. You're muted, Kate. Oh, are you a yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. And Maggie Sharon, yes. Thank you guys so much. That was a ton of work and it was needed and very appreciated.
Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you. Sherburne, if you can take yourselves off mute. Do I have a motion for the second reading of the proposed revision to the physical restraint policy to approve?
Amanda Brown, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Nancy Cordell, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, I'll do roll call vote. Nancy Cordell,
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Amanda Brown,
Amanda Brown, yes.
and Megan Page, yes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the vote to approve the 2021-22 school year calendar that's in your packet. Dover, do I have a motion to approve the 2021-22 calendar?
So moved.
Colleen, and a second?
Mark Healy, second.
And is there any discussion? I feel like we're approving this now, but we still don't really know what's going to happen.
Everything is subject to change. There's no
Sorry
question
to
about
put that
it.
out there. It's wonderful to have something that looks like we're used to looking at it. And so my inclination is we approve it and then there's an asterisk next to it. But is there any discussion, Dover? Okay, I do a quick roll call. Sarah?
Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
And Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
And Leslie?
Leslie Leon, yes.
And Brooke Matteries, yes. And I will throw it to you, Maggie.
Sure. Do I have a motion from someone at the region to approve the proposed calendar for 21-22?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Thank you, Lynn. Do I have a second?
Potter, second.
Thank you, Kate Potter. Lynn Collins made the motion. Kate Potter seconded. Please take yourselves off mute. Judy Miller,
Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn Collins,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Ann Hovey,
Ann Hovey, yes.
Michael Jaffe,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter. Kate Potter, I think yes. You say you're on mute, but then somehow it's like you're muted. It's weird. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. And Maggie Sharon, yes. And I too am dreaming that we can be back to regular school and also delighted about the way that Labor Day and Rosh Hashanah connect. So thank you to the calendars and to all of the moon cycles.
On that note, you're up, Megan.
Okay, Sherburne, can you take yourselves off mute, please? Do I have a motion to approve the 21-22 district calendar?
Amanda Brown, so moved.
Second?
Nancy Cordell, second.
Any discussion? Okay, quick roll call. Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Nancy?
Nancy Cordell, yes.
And Megan Page, yes.
All right, thank you. Next, I'm going to turn to Anne and the superintendent's search update.
Thanks, Brooke. And I wanted to say quickly, thank you to the school committee members for sitting through long interviews last week. And I'd also like to do a quick I will do a more extensive shout out, but a quick thank you to Cheryl Ingersoll. Without her, nothing would happen in the district, I'm convinced, but she has been instrumental with this process, and none of this would be possible without her. There are many more to thank, but I just really wanted to give her a very vocal and well-deserved shout out and thanks. For those of you who are not aware, we do have 3 candidates who are going to be visiting campus. One is visiting tomorrow. While they're visiting, although they're visiting, we still need to have Zoom calls for the larger groups. And so parents who are not aware, Robert Wargo, who will be coming to visit tomorrow, his parent Zoom call is at 2 to 3:45 tomorrow afternoon. You should have gotten a link for that, but if you have not, it will be posted on the district website tomorrow. He'll also be meeting with teachers bright and early in the morning from 7 to 7:45. All the teachers should also have gotten that link, and then he'll be meeting with administrators throughout the day. If you have any interest in learning more about candidates, there's a lot on the district website under the superintendent search. You can see videos from last week's interviews. Their resumes are there. And if you have any questions, as always, please reach out to the SUPT search at Dover-Sherborn.org website, and someone will get back to you in the next, within 24 hours, I would say. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to having people on campus, even though we won't necessarily put eyes to them on them. We will at least see them sitting in our library or seeing them on our campus and then have a chance to talk with them. So thank you. And there'll be more updates in the next few weeks. You'll be hearing more from the search team. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anne. Okay, so we're going to come in under 8:30. So let's do it. The last thing we have is the consent agenda. We're going to actually pull out the minutes of October 19th. So we're going to only be voting on December 8th and December 16th. So do I have Dover folks? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, i.e. the minutes of December 8th and December 16th?
Mark Healy, so moved.
Thank you, Mark. And a second?
Colleen Burt, second.
And is there any discussion? December, and I should say the September ones will, or the October ones will appear at a later date. Okay, roll call. Sarah?
Sarah Gutierrez Dunn, yes.
Colleen?
Colleen Burt, yes.
Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
What? Leslie, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here. Leslie Leon, yes.
Okay, and Brooke Matteries, yes. And I'll throw it to Maggie. Thank you.
Okay, I'll talk fast. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the meetings of December 8th and December 16th?
Anne Hovey, so moved.
Motion by Anne. Do I have a second?
Judy Miller, second.
Seconded by Judy. Please take yourself off mute. Is there any discussion? Fantastic. Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Kate Potter.
Potter, yes.
Lynn Collins.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Anne Hovey.
Anne Hovey, yes.
Judy Miller.
Judy Miller, yes.
And Maggie Sharon, yes. And Megan, it's all you.
Thank you very much. Sherborn, can you take yourselves off mute, please? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda from December 8th and December 16th?
Nancy Cordell, so moved. Oh,
second?
Go for it, Nancy. Second. Amanda Brown, second.
Thank you. Quick roll call. Nancy?
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Great. I should have asked. Any discussion? Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I was just grabbing.
Megan, you need to vote.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. Megan Page, yes.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, I think we are done. I know we will have some superintendent search meetings. Our next scheduled meeting, I was just going to get my, is April 6th. But obviously we will be meeting before then. And I think we can pull to adjourn. Thank you everyone for being here. Much appreciated. So all in favor of adjourning, this meeting? Anyone opposed? I didn't think so. Okay, thank you.